In January 2008, a group of archaeologists were invited to excavate the site of St John's College, one of Oxford University's 38 colleges. The site proved to be a rich source of findings, including a 4,000-year-old Neolithic earthwork enclosure, or henge, probably used as a temple by a sun-worshipping pagan cult. This was one of the largest prehistoric henges ever discovered in Britain, at around 400 foot in diameter. Also, they found a medieval dumping ground. Then, suddenly, archaeologists unearthed an even more exciting discovery: human bones. Sean Wallace from Thames Valley Archaeological Services said, "At first we thought it was just the remains of one individual. Then, to our surprise, we realized that corpses had been dumped one on top of another. Wherever we dug, there were more of them. Not only did we have a 4,000-year-old prehistoric temple, but now a mass grave as well." After a month of digging and 2 years of lab tests, the researchers concluded that between 34 and 38 individuals were buried in the grave, and that all of them had succumbed to a bloody and violent fate. 20 of the skeletons bore punctures in their vertebrae and pelvic bones, and 27 skulls were broken or cracked, indicating traumatic head injuries. From markings on the ribs, experts were able to ascertain that at least a dozen of the victims had been stabbed in the back, and that attempts were made on 5 others. Some victims had suffered serious burns to their heads, backs, pelvic regions, and arms. Radiocarbon analysis of the bones revealed that the remains all dated from 960 to 1020 AD. At first, experts assumed that they were victims of a mass execution, not uncommon during that period. The Oxford grave, however, did not fit the profile of a typical execution cemetery. There were far too many corpses dating from the same era, whereas execution cemeteries tend to contain the bodies of people put to death over the course of many years. Also, execution victims tended to be various different ages and body types. By contrast, the individuals buried at Oxford were all fit, fighting-age males who were unusually large, with extremely robust physiques. When scientists measured atomic variations within the skeleton bone collagen, the tests indicated that these men had eaten more fish and shellfish than the average Anglo-Saxon. This evidence finally led to the conclusion that this was a mass grave full of Viking warriors. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the king at the time, Ethelred the Unready, was informed that the Viking mercenaries he'd paid to help protect his kingdom intended to beguile him out of his life. Whether or not this threat was real or fabricated remains a mystery, but regardless, Ethelred used this as his excuse when he sanctioned one of the most heinous acts in English history, the St. Brice's Day massacre, which occurred on 13th of November 1002. Ethelred himself wrote the following 2 years later: "A decree was sent out by me, with the counsel of my leading men and magnates, to the effect that all of the Danes that had sprung up on this island, sprouting like cockles amongst the wheat, were to be destroyed by a most just extermination." The archaeologists who exhumed the skeletons in the grounds of St. John's College believe that they were indeed victims of Ethelred's plot to rid England of all Danes. The king himself even described how the residents of Oxford killed a group of Danes in a local church. Striving to escape death, the Danes entered a sanctuary of Christ, having broken by force the doors and bolts, and resolved to make a refuge and defence for themselves therein against the people of the town and the suburbs. But when all of the people in pursuit strove, forced by necessity, to drive them out, and could not, they set fire to the building's timbers and burnt it down. Wallace, in charge of the excavation, surmises that the townspeople loaded the corpses onto a cart and drove out through the north gate of the city, then threw the Vikings into the prehistoric henge, the largest ditch near Oxford's northern exit. Unfortunately for Ethelred, his triumph on the St. Brice's Day massacre was short-lived. The surviving Danes regrouped and attacked the British Isles with renewed force. As a further consequence, many of the battles fought during these turbulent times set in motion a chain of events which would change the course of England's future. It may also have earned Ethelred the nickname of ill-advised or unready. Supposedly, Gunhild, sister of the infamous Viking Svein Forkbeard, was among the victims of the massacre, although her body was never found. Neither her gender nor her royal blood saved her, as apparently she was beheaded with the other Danes, though she declared plainly that the shedding of her blood would cost all England dear, as said by William Malmesbury. Gunhild's words proved prophetic. In 1017 AD, Svein's son Canute was crowned King of England and officially recognised as a monarch at the Witan at Oxford the following year. In 1022, another Witan was held in the city, this time to translate the laws of England into Latin and apply them equally within England and the Danelaw. It would take 25 years for the Anglo-Saxons to reclaim the crown, and only a generation for them to lose it once more, this time to William the Conqueror, who was allegedly a direct descendant of the great Viking warrior Rollo. In 1036, the Council of Oxford declared Harold Harefoot, son of Canute the Great, regent of England on behalf of his brother Harthacnut, so England was once again under Scandinavian rule. Prior to all of this, it is important to note that Oxford was razed to the ground by Vikings in 979 AD, which was probably a fundamental reason for Ethelred sanctioning the massacre, and intentions were clearly high on both sides, as in early 1015, Sigurfirth and Morcar, chiefs of the 5 boroughs of the Danelaw, attended an assembly in Oxford where they were murdered by Edric Striona, ealdorman of Mercia. Elsewhere in Oxfordshire, a rare Viking hoard containing arm rings, coins and silver ingots was discovered by a metal detectorist near Watlington. It was buried around the end of the 870s, and amongst the hoard were 186 coins, some fragmentary, from the reigns of King Alfred the Great of Wessex and King Ceolwulf of Mercia. Many of the coins were jointly issued by the two rulers to celebrate them becoming allies. However, shortly after the coins were minted, Alfred and Ceolwulf appear to have turned against one another. Very little was written about the Mercian monarch except for Alfred describing him as a foolish puppet of the Vikings. The short length of the alliance makes the rare coins even more valuable. They are now housed in the British Museum. The Battle of Ashdown, once Berkshire and now in Oxfordshire, took place on the 8th of January 871. Alfred the Great was only 22 years old when he led the army of his brother, the then King Ethelred of Wessex, in a victorious battle against the invading Danes. In the town of Taston, near Witney, there is an impressive 7-foot-tall standing stone. According to local folklore, it was caused by a thunderbolt cast down from the skies by the Norse god Thor. This is how it came to be called the Thor Stone. It is first recorded in the survey of the Chadlington Hundred in the late 13th century. It is believed that the village, Taston, got its name from the stone, as it is recorded as Torsten in the year 1278. It is possible that it was once part of a larger megalithic pagan stone circle, and it appears that the rest of the stones were arranged into a neat pile at the crossroads at the centre of the village. The fact that the stone was named after a Norse god may indicate that there was a fair amount of Viking activity and influence in the locality. Bicester, my hometown, was situated in a Saxon border region, and a Mercian fort was probably established on the site of Graven Hill on the outskirts of the town. The town's name also reflects this. Bicester means Beorna's Fort of the Warriors. Beorna is another name for St. Birinus, who helped to introduce Christianity to the area in the 7th century. Graven Hill was the site of a conflict between the Saxons and Danes in 873, and Bicester itself was reputedly destroyed by a Viking raid in 912. There is much more evidence of Viking events and artefacts in Oxfordshire, which I plan to cover some other time. A couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to see some of the skeletons unearthed at St. John's College at an exhibition ran by the Oxford Museum in Woodstock. The entire exhibition was really fascinating, and it was so cool to see some Viking skeletons up close.